This is part one of a three-part series. We invited all of the Norfolk County District Attorney candidates on the ballot to come and be interviewed. You'll hear from the 6 that responded and were interested and available. Some of these episodes may include references to suicide, domestic violence, sexual assault. Please do take care while you listen. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Liz Speaks podcast. My name is Liz Speakman, and I'm so happy to have you here. The purpose of this podcast is to provide information about what's happening locally and give my take on things. We really want to make sure that you have opportunities for civic engagement. So each episode will have some kind of thing that you can do to plug into your community and get involved. Right now we're doing a few interviews with the different Norfolk County District Attorney candidates. I'm really excited to have Djuna Perkins here with me today. Welcome, Djuna.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So we'll dive right in. So tell me what made you decide to run for district attorney?
So that's an awesome question. So I've been a lawyer in Massachusetts for 33 years. I've spent that entire time fighting for justice for victims of crime all over Massachusetts. And for 10 years as a prosecutor, first in the Attorney General's office under Scott Harshbarger, and then in the Suffolk County District Attorney's office under Ralph Martin, where in my last job I was the chief of the domestic violence unit. So I had oversight responsibility for all domestic violence cases in Suffolk County. I also supervised the Dorchester District Court, which is the second largest trial court in the state. I helped establish the domestic violence court in Dorchester. I was on the homicide response team. And then for the last 20 years, I've been in private practice, where I first representing victims of sexual assault and childhood sexual abuse in cases in civil litigation against institutions like the Catholic Church. Also, camps, schools, colleges. And then for the last 13 years in my own practice in Dedham, where I live, investigating sexual misconduct and discrimination for schools, workplaces, municipalities, and police departments. So K-12 schools, most of the major colleges and universities in the state and around New England. I do this work because I have some personal experience with injustice. Mm-hmm. When I was a newborn baby, my mother was suffering from severe postpartum depression and died by suicide.
Oh, I'm
4
so
months.
Sorry.
Thank you. 4 months after that, my father was stabbed during a riot in New York City in the summer of '68. Nearly died, and the police never even looked for his attacker. So in the wake of those events, my childhood was really chaotic. Poverty, free lunch, food stamps, substance abuse of the adults in my life, mental health problems. I have people in my family who are victims of serious crimes and people in my family who've gone to state prison. And so because of all those things, I decided to be a lawyer to speak for those who didn't have a voice, like I didn't as a kid. And so that's why when I saw the failure of the district attorney to prosecute the murder of Sandra Birchmore in 2021, I was absolutely horrified, because it was apparent to me that any experienced prosecutor would have understood that that was a murder. And as a former prosecutor who prosecuted exactly those cases, I couldn't just sit by and do nothing. So I decided to run 2 years ago, even though I've never run for office before. I've never run, not even from my town meeting. I just was so mad, and we are living in times when we all have to do our part. And this is a thing I know how to do. There's lots of other things I don't know how to do, but this is literally my life's work.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
So in terms of the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office, what do you think is working well, and what do you think could use some improvement?
Mm-hmm. So, one thing, it's really interesting, because, of course, in the course of 2 years of campaigning all over the county, in all 28 of our towns, you hear a lot of stuff. Mm-hmm. And some of the stuff, the main positive thing I get feedback about is the district attorney's work on the opioid crisis. People largely give him good marks on that, and several people have asked, if I would continue that work, and of course. In fact, we have one drug court in Norfolk County. I would love to see another one, if in a different place in the county. if there were resources for that. So I think I think he's done a good job there. I think there's plenty of people in the office who do good work, and I'm sure, have their hearts in the right place, want to serve, they're doing it for the right reasons, just want justice. I think where he has failed is in some decisions that seem to have been driven by ego, and ego and incompetence, whether it's ego or incompetence, have zero place in a district attorney's office. So obviously it's the failure to prosecute the murder of Sandra Birchmore. It's the really bad decisions in the Karen Reed case, which I think is what caused all the controversy we saw. Starting with that video where, that was actually what first got my attention, was the video that the district attorney put out in the summer of 2023, in which he vouched for the credibility of Trooper Proctor, which, as the rest of us didn't know at the time how bad Trooper Proctor was. But in this video, it was inappropriate enough for me as a former prosecutor I literally dropped my spoon in my bowl as I was watching the video and was like, what did he just do? Because
can you tell me why that's inappropriate for the DA?
It's prosecution 101. A prosecutor shall not, it's an ethical rule. A prosecutor shall not make any statements that could materially prejudice a defendant in public, because the jury pool is out there. Right. You can't have the district attorney say, I believe that witness over that witness. It's for the jury to decide who is innocent or guilty. So that was just shocking, because it was just very, very basic. That's what got my attention. Then the next thing was, of course, the overcharging, which I think most of us agree that case was overcharged. And then, then the failure to acknowledge the evidence that came out of the federal investigation. So the Trooper Proctor text messages, the accident reconstruction report. The district attorney has an ethical obligation to keep an open mind. So when you get new evidence that undercuts your theory of the case, you have an obligation to look at it and examine it. And maybe you disagree with it, but you have to come up with a good faith rationale for why that is. And he didn't do it. And even the charges that they brought, not only was it overcharged, but he presented two conflicting theories of the case. So if you charge somebody with murder, you have to have the intent to kill, you have to prove that they had the intent to kill the person. But if you are really, really drunk, as it appears that Karen Reed was, at least based on the blood alcohol reading that she had the next day, and then they extrapolated it back, it's difficult for you to form the intent to murder anyone. So you're asking the jury, like, what are you asking them to do? Mm-hmm. Did she intend to murder him, or was she really, really drunk, like you said she was? And so that, I think, is very confusing for the jury. Those are only two of the cases I have heard about. I mean, there is a family in Braintree whose 12-year-old son was on the spectrum, and two of his friends took nude pictures of him and spread them around at school. And when the parents found out, they go to the police station, and then also the DA's office, and they reported that the kids who took the pictures were the sons of police detectives, and the dads were allowed to interview their own sons, and they, ultimately decide, nope, there's nothing to see here. And when the parents challenged that question, just simply asked, could you reinvestigate with somebody else who's not the dads? They were treated terribly, and that was in the Globe. But I've since also spoken to that family, and there was a case in Dover where the chair of the select board had improperly stored his personal guns in the trunk of his car, and then the car got stolen out of his driveway. And he was charged with failure to properly secure a firearm. And that case was null prost by the district attorney's office.
It was what?
Null prost, meaning dismissed.
Dismissed, okay.
So the district attorney has total authority to decide what charges are brought and who to charge. And there's this magic bullet called the null prost, where if they want to, they can just say, I'm not going to prosecute that. They don't have to explain it. And in that particular case, though, they wrote in the document that's called the null prost that they filed in court, that in exchange for this, for the chair of the select board resigning from his position on the select board, he would not be prosecuted. Now, the rest of us, that's a felony. Yeah. And also, they never found the guns. So those guns are around somewhere, doing bad things. And the rest of us, if that had happened to us, would have been prosecuted. And that's just outrageous. So those are just some of the things.
And I think for me, I've worked in the field of domestic violence and sexual assault for a long time, as you know. And so I've had a lot of different interactions with assistant district attorneys and the victim advocates. But I think most people probably don't totally know what a district attorney does or what the office does, or in fact, the amount of power the role has. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the amazing thing. A lot of people, the district attorney has absolute authority over who to charge with crimes and what crimes to charge. And many crimes can be charged in a variety of ways, depending on how serious the district attorney thinks the case is, and which is kind of a subjective point of view. I mean, you're supposed to be using some objective criteria, but sometimes sometimes it is just a gut feeling. And you can't do anything about it. So there's no appeal. You can't sue the district attorney because they have absolute immunity from suit. So the district attorney can overcharge a case, and there's nothing you can do, which is what happened in the Karen Reed case, or what many people believe happened in the Karen Reed case. You can undercharge a case, like what people believe happened in the Sandra Birchmore case. And the district attorney has no boss except for the voters. So a lot of people think, oh, isn't the attorney general the boss of the DA? Nope. Isn't it the governor? Nope. It's only the voters, and the district attorney has a 4-year term. So it's incredibly important that people trust the person who is making these really high stakes decisions, because with a stroke of a pen, the district attorney can change a family's life forever.
Yeah. So you had mentioned these 2 high-profile cases. Can you tell me more about your perspective on these cases, and maybe for any listeners who don't totally know the details, sort of a general gist from your perspective?
So, Sandra Birchmore was a 23-year-old pregnant woman who was found dead in her apartment in Canton in 2021. It initially appeared to be a suicide because of the way the body was found. But as I mentioned before, any experienced prosecutor would have understood that that was a murder. Within minutes, I think, or within a very short time, they knew that she had been having a sexual relationship with a married Stoughton police officer who she had met when she was 12 years old and a member of the Police Cadets Explorers program, which was meant for vulnerable at-risk kids, of which she was obviously one. And he ran that program. And he started grooming her for sex, and at least that's what is now alleged. And by the time she was 15, he was having sex with her, and by the time she was an older teenager, he and his twin brother and their supervisor were all believed to be having sex with her, and they were all Stoughton police officers. And so the reason that we really believe that it was a murder is because 2 years later, the federal government indicted him on on charges related to the death. They can't charge murder because that's a state crime. And that is where the failure of our local government is just so obvious, because first of all, the charges that have been brought in federal court are much more difficult to prove than a murder. Second of all, it is literally the job of one's community to speak for you when you are murdered. And if we can't speak for the most vulnerable among us, which she was, what the hell are we doing? What are we paying taxes for? So that was, extremely horrifying. So back to Karen Reed, the things that really bother me in the Karen Reed case going back to Sandra Birchmore for a second. The other thing that really, really bothered me that the district attorney did was that he continued to insist that Sandra Birchmore was a suicide, even after 2 independent medical examiners concluded the opposite. And and he continues to insist, I think even to this day, that it was a suicide, even after our medical examiner now has changed her opinion to inconclusive. And if you compare that to the Karen Reed case, and the reason that the district attorney did that was because he said, I'm relying on the decision of the medical examiner. What a lot of people don't realize is that it's the district attorney who is statutorily responsible for death investigations. It's not the medical examiner, and it's not the police. They're all supposed to work together, but the medical examiner can't make that second decision about manner of death without full information from the DA's office and the police. And what I read in the Globe was that the medical examiner said they didn't go to the scene because the police told them that it was a suicide, and the police said, well, we gave all the information to the DA's office, but really, the buck stops with the district attorney. So if an ADA assigned to the case thought that it actually might be a homicide, it's their job to push back on the medical examiner and or the police. And clearly they didn't do that. So that's really disturbing, especially since in the Karen Reed case, the medical examiner concluded that that the manner of death of John O'Keefe was inconclusive, and yet the district attorney charged murder. So he clearly knows that he has the power and the discretion to do that. So another couple things in the Karen Reed case, of course, I think most people probably know that John O'Keefe was a Boston police officer who was found dead in the snow in front of a house in Canton. I think that was 2021 too, or 22. I think it's 22. And Karen Reed was prosecuted for murder for his death. And one of the things that really bothered me about the case in terms of victim services, particularly, is that another prosecution 101 kind of rule is you do not you do not promise a family an outcome that you cannot give them, because that is the worst thing, to put them on that kind of roller coaster. And not only did they do that once for the first trial, where the poor family was sitting through this all this controversy, facing these people every day as they go into the courthouse for like a year and a half, whatever that was, and then they did it again. And made them sit through it again, only to get an acquittal, only to be really to lose the case, other than the OUI. So that was a complete travesty. The other complete travesty about that is that the district attorney's operating budget after salaries is like $2.7 million a year. It's not a lot, and that's for everything: software, lights, rent, whatever. And he spent, on the second retrial, on the retrial alone, he spent I want to say it was 1.7, more than half of the annual operating budget on the prosecution of Karen Reed. And that means money that was not spent on the other, on the many other complex and horrifying cases that we've had in the past few years, including people like Sandra Birchmore and Anna Walsh, and and that is not a good use of taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, and my understanding is that case would have just remained that she had died by suicide if it weren't for her family and her friends pushing for someone else to take a look at this.
Yes. Yeah, and what was the other thing, of course, that's crazy about that is that I think the internal investigation of Farwell began, who was the police officer who's now charged federally, began almost immediately after that, which means that it's quite likely that everybody knew that this relationship was going on. And that is equally horrifying. The fact that this happened in our community is absolutely unacceptable. And I just,
I know.
It's just really, really, really incredible.
And speaking of that, recently some of the text messages were released that between, if I understand correctly, the state police investigator and one of the Canton police officers that were involved in the Karen Reed trial. Any comments about that?
Yeah, so after the second Karen Reed verdict, June, a year ago, when Karen Reed was acquitted, I issued a statement calling for the resignation of Michael Morrissey for many of the reasons that we just discussed, but one of them was also the failure of, because Michael Morrissey knew or should have known that Trooper Proctor was not fit to be of service. And the reason I said that then, and which is obviously even more true now, is because there were thousands of messages back then. They work together. The state police unit is literally in the same building, and they are professional colleagues. I can't imagine that they're not having lunch together, maybe going out for drinks sometimes. That Trooper Proctor did not wake up one morning and start talking like this and thinking like this one day. This is the kind of person who has thought this way and spoken this way his entire adult life, at least his adult life. And so the idea that the district attorney had no idea is preposterous to me. And so the fact that he didn't do anything about it because even though he's not a supervisor of the troopers, he can ask for people to be reassigned. He can say, I'm not using this person ever again, so don't, so give me somebody else. And the failure to do that is just unbelievable. And the text that came out yesterday, it's like, you can't even, this is not just somebody having a little venting session. The stuff that is in this guy's head it's like KKK level.
Yeah.
I mean,
I know. I only read a few of them, but I felt sick to my stomach.
Yeah.
And
the fact, how did somebody like that get entrusted with our safety, and is somebody who is supposed to be neutral and caring about every single one of us?
Right.
Like, sorry.
I know.
No.
I know.
I mean,
So let's.
Sorry.
I know. I think we both could get fired up about this pretty easily. So I want to talk about you, though. So Djuna, what makes you uniquely suited for this role in particular?
So I think, first of all, it is really just the culmination of all the work I've done for my entire professional career. I mean, I really like people. Justice is incredibly important. I mean, another thing that frustrates me is when people are so focused on the national issues, because the foundation, a defining element of a functioning democracy is a healthy justice system, of which the criminal justice system is a critical part. And the best defense for us against the national situation is a good defense. I mean, the best offense is a good defense, meaning our local institutions have to be tight to protect us from the outside, and also they may be all we have. So it's just really important. So, I've worked a lot in many different, sort of the life experience and the professional experience together are really helpful, having worked in the education world and seeing how these same sorts of situations are resolved there, having done it in the private sector, doing civil trials, that's yet another perspective, and also combining it with 10 years of actual state court prosecutorial experience. I know how DA's offices run. I have an excellent network of professionals who are highly respected. It's like, when I decided to run, it was sort of like reactivating the superheroes, calling everybody up and saying like, all right, I'm going to do this. And it's, that's exciting, because being a prosecutor was the best job I ever had. And you don't ever lose, just like a police officer, I think, in some ways, you just never lose that identity. And so even though I've gone on and done other things, in my head, I'm still really doing public service because of what I do. And, you get a chance to make a real difference in people's lives, and that there's nothing more rewarding than doing good for the sake of doing good.
Yeah, I agree. That's, I'm sure that our paths have crossed over the years with folks that we've served who've experienced sexual assault and domestic violence, and just knowing how challenging the criminal legal system is. And you mentioned the Dorchester DV court. I just happened to meet the judge. I'm blanking.
Sydney Hanlon?
Yes, I just met her this week, and she's amazing. So it's one of the things I think a lot of people don't necessarily know about the DA's office is the sort of specialty courts that can exist, and sort of why we might want something like that. So I'm curious to hear your perspective on that.
Well, the court system, our justice system, is based on an 18th century model where, we've come so much farther in understanding how the human brain works, how mental health issues might affect people's decisions, how substance abuse affects things. We're so much more sophisticated, and the court system is still kind of behind. And it doesn't have time. There's so many cases, there's so many, the main job of most of the cases, you just gotta turn them out, keep them moving, keep them going. But that sometimes means that people don't get justice, because some cases are complicated and complex, and you have to be patient with people who are afraid to testify, or don't testify well because they're shy or something. So sometimes the specialty courts are a place where not only there's a little bit more room for complexity, but also the outcomes might be somewhat different. So maybe there's diversion programs that allow people a second chance, or the restorative justice programs, or in the case of DV court, it's a judge who is better trained and in understanding the dynamics of domestic violence and sexual assault, and is not going to be judgmental, and because honestly, the number one thing that people will talk about, it's just like what kindergartners say. What kindergarten teachers say. You may not remember what somebody said, but you'll always remember how they made you feel.
Yes.
And that is that's what every single person coming out of the courthouse says.
Yeah.
Even if they win, if the judge was mean, that's what they remember.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And I know whether it's substance use, mental health, sexual assault, entering into this system is incredibly intimidating and scary. And from what I've heard from folks, that depending on who they interact with, who their assistant district attorney is, who their victim advocate is, who the judge is, that really has a huge impact on their path of healing.
Yes.
Because you have the trauma, and then if you're compounding the trauma with judgment and blaming and not believing, that's another trauma now that you have a path towards healing. But the folks that I've talked to who have said, my DA was so understanding, they gave me the time to share what was happening for me, they really listened, they were thoughtful and compassionate, that helps so much with the healing. And I think that's what I really want people to know about the district attorney's office, is that it's not only sort of how people are entering into this system or not, it's actually the experience for all the people involved, the person being prosecuted, the victim, the family members. It has such ripple effects on our community that I think a lot of people don't necessarily sort of
appreciate,
think, right, or even understand that unless you've had to be in that system for some reason. Then you don't know, and so you may think, oh, I don't know who to vote for DA. Like, does it really matter? And it matters.
It does really matter. It really does, because what the voter is actually buying when they elect a district attorney is their judgment, and the judgment of every single person they hire. So, are you going to pick somebody who has a not only wide range of professional experience, who has worked with people from all walks of life, poor, rich, white, black, gay, not gay, gay, straight, every kind of permutation of person, or you and who's also worked in many different settings, so it can bring in many different ideas and collaborations, or do you want somebody without that kind of judgment or experience? And because it can make all the difference. I mean, the thing that really I say all the time is that we're in the 21st century. In many ways we have so much luxury, we have so many great things, but life can still be really, really hard for people. And you have to be compassionate, but also you have to be able to distinguish between a bad decision made on a bad day, the most evil person in the world, because there is, and everybody in between. And it's a huge spectrum. And so you have to be able to make those decisions so that on the other side, when someone is prosecuted, they're going to, instead of continue committing crime, they're going to become productive people. And that makes us all safer.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've seen that people's judgment can be impacted by their own personal biases, and we see that across the law enforcement system when you look at data. And of course, we're all impacted by our own personal biases, and we don't always necessarily even know what our biases are. But when it's this egregious, when we see these text messages, and it's this clear that the personal biases of the people we are entrusting with our safety are significantly impacting their judgment in their job, that's where I think we have a responsibility as communities to do something and say, this actually doesn't represent us.
No, and I think part of that, how do we fix the DA's office so that this kind of thing doesn't happen again? I mean, we do need implicit bias training. I want to ensure that all staff, and also are trauma informed, get a lot of, that's the, in the victim world, that's the survivor world, I should say. That's the trauma informed investigations are the gold standard. Nobody should tell anybody otherwise. And, and also I think representation matters. I mean, our strength does lie in our diversity, and I think that diversity in every definition that you can think of. We all belong, like that. That's kind of, and the more we make everyone feel like they belong, the stronger and safer society we have.
Absolutely. So on a different note, you've been at this for a couple years. So what energizes you? What keeps you going?
I think meeting people who get really excited about it. I think it's actually been a lot of fun. I mean, for a long time I was by myself, so it was just like people would be like, "Why are you doing this? What is so far away? Like, who cares?" But I'm really proud of the relationships I've built in this amount of time. I was just looking at the endorsement list of select board members from around the county this morning. I was like, this is really a lot. And then Democratic Town Committee chairs and other local activists. I think, and that was just from hard work, really. I mean, those are people I did not know 2 years ago. I am not political, and I was not born here, so I don't have some of those kind of relationships. But so that part is really fun. It's also really rewarding when people come to me and say thank you for running, and I appreciate it. And I, although all the feedback I get, except sometimes online, is positive, in person is positive. There's kind of a special look in women's eyes, I have to say. Like people, especially older women, it's like you're doing a thing that we wish we could have done, or we wish we would have had.
Yeah, we wish we'd have had somebody
both
when this happened to me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, the other thing is, I've talked a lot about domestic violence and sexual assault, but the reason for that is because we live in a generally safe county. 4 of our counties were recently voted like the top 100 safest cities in the country. So we don't have a lot of street crime. Right. We don't have a lot of really serious bad stuff on a daily basis. The worst things I think that are happening in our county are happening in our homes and at school. We've had at school with sexual exploitation and sexual assault issues, and at home domestic violence, sexual assault, and I think since COVID, there's been a national uptick in domestic violence. And in our county, in the past 5 years, I think we've had 10 domestic violence homicides. And for a very safe county, that's just bizarre.
Yeah.
What is going on?
Right.
And clearly, you can't stop everything, but what else can we do as a community to make this not happen?
Right.
Because it just feels like the crimes that we're seeing that come out or in the paper every single day are just like most of us are looking around saying, what is happening?
Yeah. And we know those are preventable. We know the warning signs for, potential fatal domestic violence situations. And there are evidence-based ways to be able to intervene before it gets to that point. But if your local officials are not putting those assessments and interventions in place, this is what we're going to see. Yeah. And I think that the domestic violence fatality review team recommended that every DA's office establish a high-risk domestic violence response team, and I would definitely have that. I mean, the other reason... And so many other counties have had them forever.
Yes.
For so long.
Yes.
And so I have opinions about that.
Yeah,
too.
I mean, there's so much that can be done. I mean, the other piece is that about 30%, when I was in district court, about half of the trials that we did were OUIs. The other half were domestic violence. And there was like a tiny bit of everything else. A little, obviously a little drugs, but overall, I think nationwide, I would say that domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, hate crimes, and elder abuse probably add up to about 30 to 35% of all crimes. And then everything else, then there's a whole, like about a third that is traffic offenses and OUIs, and then the middle third, which is everything else, property crimes and other kinds of assault and stuff. But that is a lot of crime that really is preventable, as you say, because those are not spontaneous, they're not impulsive, spontaneous, whatever. Those are planned, seriously evil behaviors.
Mm-hmm. And we have a responsibility and an ability to intervene with those.
Mm-hmm.
So as we wrap up, for this podcast, we always like to provide an opportunity for people to get engaged and involved. And so if folks are hearing this and they say, I want to help out with Djuna's campaign, what can they do?
Well, the easiest, we have a Facebook page, we have obviously a website, and there you can read more about me, read more about the campaign and my ideas. You can also, we have a Facebook page. You can also volunteer on that website. We have a Facebook page, an Instagram page. One of the easiest things to do is to text your friends in any of the towns in Quincy, in Norfolk County, to tell them to look me up and vote for me on September 1st, because that's very important. It's the primary, and it's a weird day. It's before Labor Day.
I know.
So either vote by mail if you're going to be away, or make a voting plan. And the other one is to just engage on social media. Even if you're following the pages or liking it or sharing it, that's a free and easy way. Of course, yes, we also have we have lawn signs. We do a ton of house parties. So if you wanted to invite some neighbors and friends to come over, those are fun too.
Yeah, great. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here with us
today. Thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you all for joining us today. And Djuna already did my pitch about September 1st.
Oh, sorry.
I always make a pitch that September 1st is before Labor Day. It's going to be a tough day, but we need everyone to get out and vote on that day. And we'll see you next time. Today we have Craig MacLellan, who's running for Norfolk County District Attorney. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Liz.
Great. So we'll jump right in. So tell me about why you decided to run for District Attorney.
So I had sort of my first exposure to public service and politics and public speaking in high school. I sort of had I went to an all-boys high school, and it was sort of a commuter school. I was having a hard time. One of my teachers there asked me if I was interested in joining the Model United Nations, and it's an extracurricular activity. And it just sort of changed the trajectory of my life, and from there I found a passion. I then started running for student offices in college and law school, and then took public service positions at a law school. I started as assistant DA, and it's always been public service is something that's important to me. I'm very active in my own community of Cohasset. I'm on the school committee. I organize the 4th of July celebrations there, a host of other things that I'm involved in. I just think it's important to contribute to your community. And so because of my professional background, where I've been a practicing attorney in Massachusetts for over 20 years, and pretty much all of that time I've been connected in some way, shape, or form to the criminal justice system here in Massachusetts. I'm qualified to serve as district attorney, and I thought it was the right time and the right race for me. So I'm running for DA to help move Norfolk forward in the right direction as best as I can.
Great, thank you. So currently in the Norfolk County DA's office, what do you think is working well, and what do you think could use improvement?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Liz, because I think that I don't think the DA's office really gets a fair shake in the news. Certainly there are major failures, and I think a lot of people are aware of those failures, but it's sort of the issue with the news and the media is a lot of times there's an over-reporting on failures and not enough reporting on successes. And people, I think, should be aware that there are a lot of successful prosecutions going on in that case as well. By way of example, just focus on maybe a little bit more of the positive than the negative, right? Because everyone's talking about the controversial cases that all come into my mind when we're talking about Norfolk County DA's office, and we need to address those and take those failures seriously, for sure, and approach them with the gravity that they deserve. But I came on the school committee in Cohasset in 2019. At that time, our school district was embroiled in a controversy of our own. It was a really disturbing situation where a teacher was then accused of abusing middle school students. And so there was a lot of distrust in the district's response, and people started to question the school district, started to doubt the school district, and I thought like there was a need for new leadership and a new perspective. I didn't completely agree with the way that they were confronting this challenge, so I thought like why not jump in and try and help. And what we did was we developed this approach that started to bring the community in, like involve the community in any impactful decisions, any policy shifts, and now it's a norm for the committee. Anytime we're considering something like this, we'll never move forward until the community has had ample opportunity to share insight, concern, ideas, because just because you're on a committee doesn't mean you have the best ideas, or just because you're a district attorney doesn't mean you have the best ideas. There's a lot of talent in our community, and a lot of people have a lot of great insights, and that's how you improve, right? So we adopted this sort of like community-centric model. And what it did was it built awareness about what the district was doing. It built enthusiasm and excitement and passion. People then realized that they have true agency in what their school district was doing. And I'll come back around to the question, don't worry.
I got you.
And from there, there's blossomed this trust and confidence in the district. And now we have a top 25 school district in Massachusetts, and we have like a blue ribbon high school. It's great. And it's always evolving though. We need to always improve, right? Just because we had some success. Coming back to the district attorney's office, this is an example of a successful prosecution because that teacher that was then accused was ultimately held accountable for his actions by the Norfolk County District Attorney's office. And that's an important case.
Yeah.
Okay, that's child abuse, right? Sexual abuse of children. And it's really important that people understand that work is going on as well.
Right.
And there have been, in my hometown of Cohasset, there was a really horrific homicide.
Yeah.
And that case was successfully prosecuted. Okay, and people need to understand that office is filled with professionals that do know the job. And there are failures. Honestly, naming an organization doesn't have failures. Now, the problem with this is that it's a public organization, and it requires public trust. And the types of failures that we're seeing here, they have heavily eroded that trust because people don't like misappropriation of tax dollars. They don't like charging decisions that they feel don't reflect the situation accurately, especially if there are some potential conflicts of interest afoot. And so you have to acknowledge those failures and then endeavor to rectify them. I've sort of gone off. I mean, but my point is that like we need to not just focus on the failures and the negative. There is positive going on in that office. You have a really good foundation on which the new DA, which will hopefully be me, will be able to build upon that work.
And I think one of the criticisms that I've heard is not just the factors that you mentioned, but also that there's a sense that there's a two-tiered system of justice within the Norfolk County DA's office, and that if you have connections in law enforcement or you somehow are part of the in-group, you don't get in trouble. And I think from my experience talking to people, that's sort of the biggest concern that people have. And it's maybe not necessarily just with this office, but we've certainly seen that highlighted with this office. So thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think when you have disparate treatment, there's sort of two versions of that. One is there's actually a disparate approach that's taken in prosecutions, and then there is the perception that there's a disparate approach. However you feel about that, either one is equally damaging. So the fact that, and I say that because I'm not here to argue the merits of anyone's position, like, okay, that is happening or it's not happening. Right. The point is that the public feels that is happening.
Yes.
Okay? So you have to address that in some way. And the first way to address it, which is, I was just asked in a candidate forum the other day what I think the biggest failure of the DA's office is. To me, the biggest failure is the failure to acknowledge failure.
Right.
To this date, no one has come out and said, you know what? We could have done better here. Not only could we have done better, we should have done better. And this is how we propose doing better.
Right.
But what do you think? Because you probably have some thoughts on how we can improve, right? What do you think, Quincy? What do you think, Walpole? What do you think, Needham? How can we improve the service to the public here? But that hasn't happened, and that's their biggest failure. Because if the public is perceiving that things are not being done in a professional, accountable, proper manner, and then the office itself is not responding to that by saying, okay, we can see why you're saying that, and we acknowledge that, and we're going to endeavor to do better, that's terrible government. Okay, so I think that, again, without getting into the merits of whether or not that's true or not, I mean, I think that there's good work going on there. I think there are, professionals, knowledgeable professionals working there. I think that there have been failures that have given rise to a valid position.
Yeah.
That there are two sort of approaches to prosecution that is unacceptable. So we have to improve upon that. We have to address it. But you're not going to be able to address it unless you admit that it's happening.
Right. And I think I agree, because if there isn't in any kind of relationship, whether it's government and the public or any kind of relationship you have, when someone does something wrong, if they can't admit it, apologize, and have a plan for doing it differently, they're going to keep doing it.
You can't move on.
No, you can't.
Right.
Because you understand that they are going to keep doing the same thing. And so I think it's a similar dynamic with the public and government, that unless there is that acknowledgement and willingness to listen and be curious and have a collective plan for moving forward, you're going to stay stuck. So I'm with you on that. So I'm sure you're hearing this a lot when you're out. A lot of people don't necessarily know exactly what the role of the district attorney is and the immense power that comes with that role in determining whether someone's path goes into incarceration and sort of lifetime of crime, or perhaps support and healing. So I'm curious if you could share your perspective on the district attorney's role.
Yes, first of all, okay, thank you for bringing this up, because to me, I'm trying to deal with overarching issues here that will allow us to build a better public office. The number one issue here is I feel that the Norfolk DA's office, and this is not calling out any individual, it's just the way I believe things are, is that the office is not connected to the community enough. It's not visible enough. I would estimate that probably 1 out of 10 people in Norfolk County could have told you who the district attorney was prior to some of these controversial cases.
Yeah,
now, I bet you the number's like maybe 3 or 4 out of 10, and that improvement isn't for good reasons.
Right.
So you just, to me, highlighted what is like the major cornerstone of my campaign. It's visibility. Okay, you cannot improve service to the public. You cannot create relationships that blossom into trust if you're not out there. Okay, and I'm not talking about just getting in front of cameras when times get tough. I'm talking about the proactive, preventative work, the constructive, community engagement that's there at all times, not just tough times, right? When I'm DA, everyone will know who the district attorney is. That is going to be one of my measures for success. It's going to be, do people know who their DA is? Can you imagine? How can you expect a good service from an elected official if nobody knows who you are?
Right.
That's insane, right? Nobody knows who you are or what your office does or where it is. That is not good government, Liz. So I'm so glad you brought that up, because I feel really passionate about it, because
Clearly.
That's going to be the number one priority, is getting out there so people know who the DA is. Now, to the second part of the question, in terms of the power they wield. First of all, to me, it's a responsibility, not a power. It's also only 50% of what the DA's office should be doing. I alluded to the other 50% in that sort of proactive, preventative work, community work. So we're partnering with recovery organizations, mental health organizations, public schools, before things are evolving into criminal cases, so that we're able to, stop crime from happening before it happens, right? Then there's the sort of reactive work, which I feel like that's most of what the office is doing now, the reactive.
Right.
Someone does something wrong. They get arrested, maybe, if the investigation identifies someone that's responsible. They get prosecuted, and then a reasonable sentence is recommended to the court upon conviction, if they're held accountable. Even with that, you can take a a more proactive approach in that you're anticipating the long-term consequences of your action. Okay, so you were just talking about, different prosecution paths. I am, and everyone should just know this, I'm very open about it. I subscribe to services over sentences. Obviously, there are some offenses that mandate sentences, right? We're talking crimes of violence, someone's hurt, someone's killed. But, the lead cause of our community crimes in our district courts, it's pretty much tied, and these two things are oftentimes they come together, and that is substance abuse and mental health crisis. Okay,
which are often connected to poverty.
And which are also connected to poverty, right? But not always, which is why
not
I don't
always.
say it's the lead.
That's
because,
right, not always.
The reason poverty is absolutely up there, but those two things can affect anyone regardless
Absolutely.
of socioeconomic status. It can sometimes detrimentally impact your socioeconomic status.
Sure.
Sometimes it can even lead to it. But that's why I don't put poverty as that's a second.
Yeah.
But those are two. And I'm in the courts every day, right? In Massachusetts criminal
Yeah.
courts, and I'm telling you, like 85% of the docket in our district courts, our community courts, which are the courts where you're seeing your OUIs, your drug possession, your domestics, your bar fights, things like that.
Shoplifting.
When people think of crime, they're typically thinking that the Superior Court is dealing with the more major, the homicides, the armed robberies, the rapes, things like that, and that's different, analysis. But in order to effectively, like what we're doing now, I feel like the justice system, I've watched it evolve for better and worse, over the last 20 plus years. I think we're getting better at addressing the issues I just named as the lead causing, but we're still not doing a great job. We're doing better because I think probation departments are much more open-minded about addiction now and mental health. We have specialized sessions in courts for mental health, for recovery, for substance abuse. I still think there's some inherent flaws in those courts, not because of the intentions, but because of some of the criteria in getting people in there and keeping them in there. I think it sort of impedes the amount of people that can be helped by that process. So
you're saying like not enough, maybe like the criteria is like a little too constrictive.
It's just to give you a specific example.
Yeah.
First of all, it has to be voluntary, which I don't and sometimes that I volunteer is the product of, well, it's a better alternative than jail.
Right, it's not really voluntary.
So once you take, and you have to resolve all of your cases before you're in the recovery court. So as they're doing that, if any given defendant has a number of cases and they're in custody while these cases are pending and getting resolved, and then the longer they're in, the more ability they have to plead out to time served. And they wrap those cases up, and then by the time they get back to the recovery session, it's like, well, now I have 9 months in, it was a misdemeanor, I'm probably gonna get time served, rather just do that than work on the issue, right? Yeah. So that's a flaw. Yeah. It also, I feel like it's limited in terms of the volume that we're able to help.
Yeah.
It's just, I think and again, it's a really good thing.
Yeah.
I'm a real big proponent of recovery court. And the judges that serve in those sessions are amazing. They're such great people, and the way they approach. So there's a lot of value to it. And have you ever been to a recovery court graduation by any chance?
No, okay. I haven't.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's amazing.
Yeah.
So, and it's really because we need more of like lifting each other up and supporting each other in this world. And like like I'm getting almost like just kind of emotional just thinking about it. Like it's a real success story. You're watching someone who has changed their life and is now, because it's a phased process, so people get more independence and more responsibility as they go on until ultimately the court has deemed them they're able to succeed without court intervention anymore.
Yeah.
So we're doing a better job, but the district attorney's offices need to, I think, incorporate more diversion programming so that people are off on an alternative prosecution path before they're even getting to like the recovery court process. Not to say we should do away with that. I just think we need to put more arrows in our quiver there, because if 85%, and that's an estimate, it might even be bigger, of crimes, community crimes, arise out of those issues. If we can get our hands around that, think about how much we could reduce crime, how much we could reduce recidivism, how much we could reduce the criminal dockets in the courts. I mean, it would be amazing. Yeah. So that is the other. So visibility is the one, and everyone says like, what's your main priority? It's visibility and recovery, and I think those two terms sort of encompass a whole manner of things, but those are priorities for me.
Great, thank you. So what makes you uniquely suited for this role?
So the diversity of my experience. That's what makes me unique in comparison to other folks that are running. I am someone who has served on both sides of the criminal courtroom. That's unique. I was a prosecutor for almost a decade. I've been a criminal defense attorney for maybe more than a decade. And that's really, really important. I can't impress upon people how important it is to have someone that has served as a defense attorney as a district attorney. I think it's like baseline qualification to have served as a prosecutor. That's like if you're hiring a firefighter. Have you ever fought a fire? You want them to know the job generally. Serving on both sides of the courtroom expose you to different perspectives that one side is necessarily shielded from. And being a defense attorney, good prosecutors will balance sentencing recommendations in terms of accountability and specific life circumstances and perspectives of the accused. Not all prosecutors do that, especially young ones, because they haven't professionally matured yet. And I was guilty of that when I was a young assistant DA. Defense attorneys necessarily have to consider those. Obviously, they can't put up a sentencing recommendation that doesn't, take accountability into consideration. No court would have any appetite for that. But we of course take into consideration our clients' personal circumstances, right? You need a district attorney who has served as a defense attorney. I don't say that just because I'm the only one that has that perspective. I say that because, in retrospect, I would have been a better assistant DA if I had been a defense attorney before I was an assistant DA. Unfortunately, it's kind of, the pay is so low, it's an entry level. A lot of young lawyers in district courts, so it's you don't have those professionally mature, experienced lawyers that come and serve as assistant DAs. Maybe that's something we can change. So that's one element. The other element about my experience that makes me unique is that I serve in an elected capacity in local government. And I talked about that earlier when I gave an example of the good work that was going on in the Norfolk DA's office in my school committee experience and that whole process that we engage in. And we developed that. I've learned these really important concepts of local government. And local government is a really good model on which to build a better DA's office because, first of all, I know that DA's offices are typically treated as like too big to be local. They're local. There are 28 communities in Norfolk County. You can absolutely, I do it every day now, campaign. You can get out to those communities, okay, and build relationships. Local government is inherently collaborative and accountable because local government is generally committee-based, so there's more than one mind that has to be involved in any decision. But if you do it right, then you involve the community as well. Now you have everyone has agency in this, and you're getting better results that way. It's inherently accountable because people know who you are. And you're on the soccer field, you're in the grocery store, you are at the transfer station or the recycling center, whatever it is, and people are like, hey, I saw you guys did this the other day. Why'd you do that? I'm it's affecting my kid, or it's affecting, whatever, our schedule, whatever it is, right? And I want to talk to you about it. Well, that's accountability. You have to engage with people about how your decisions are impacting their lives. That's good government, right? So we need more of that approach, and that's sort of my unique platform in this race. And my experience makes me uniquely qualified to deliver that type of improvement to the office, that type of community-centric, sort of service-oriented approach. I think that's how we're going to move Norfolk forward together, using that model. Otherwise, if we don't have that engagement with the community, I think that even the best intentioned sort of in the weeds prosecutorial practices could be doomed to fail because you're still not addressing that erosion of trust.
Right, yeah, thank you. So we referenced the two high-profile cases that have been in the news. Can you tell me your perspective on those cases?
Yes. My perspective on those cases is that people have valid, strong feelings about them.
Mm-hmm.
And they have strong feelings about what should have happened, what should happen, who's responsible for what. One of those cases has been adjudicated, okay? The person that was accused was acquitted.
Yeah.
Okay? That means the case is over. But the impact of that case is still impacting, it's still having an effect on the office. So the important, and the community, right. And to me, the two, to me, there's not a lot of value in dwelling on that aspect of the case. Oh, are they responsible? Are they not responsible? The two issues that are important are, first and foremost, continuing to honor the memory of the life lost. Okay, because we can't forget, because to me, the sensationalized drama in one of those cases more than the other, overshadowed inappropriately the loss of life. Like, that needs to be the issue when we're talking about any sort of case involving an unattended death. Like, there was a human life lost, right? So that's, and that was something that someone helped me realize very early on when I was getting sort of overtaken years ago when this first came out and they started talking about the text messages and how long to die in the cold. That was something, that's really important. That's the fundamental thing that I hope everyone thinks about when they think about that case. The second facet of that case that I think we should continue to think about are the failures. Okay, there were several. Okay, and I listed a few earlier, right? I think there were a failure to identify certain conflicts of interest among investigators. I think there's a failure to outfit first responders with proper resources and training to sort of triage a crime scene. I think that there was a misappropriation of public funds in terms of hiring private attorneys and not trying to besmirch any private lawyers, just saying that we have a whole office of salaried assistant DAs that are already paid to do this, and they're trained to do that. And I think the biggest failure, probably the charging decision. I think I just can't understand that. But those are just to name a few, right?
Sure.
And I'm sure a lot of people, again, community engagement, right? Get out. A lot of people would have input to share to highlight other failures that should be addressed, right? That's what we need to focus on, and not specifically how they happened in that case, but how we're going to prevent them from recurring, right, in future cases, so that we're delivering a better public to the service, a better service to the public continuously. Those are the two elements that I think we should always be thinking about when we're thinking about those controversial cases. Don't get lost in the drama, in the controversy, okay? The newspapers, the media, Netflix, the TV shows, these things are designed to get people to view them, to get people to continuously click and read, okay? They are not looking to necessarily improve the way a public office functions.
Right.
That's what the DA needs to be focused on. But in times of controversy and conflict and trauma and tragedy, the DA needs to be running to the cameras, not away from them. So you need to be out there to reassure the public you serve by offering prompt, meaningful, effective responses to these problems, right? I think that would have gone a long way. For example, we talked about the death of Anna Walsh in my own town. Not once did I see we have a small town. Cohasset's a small town. It doesn't really matter what size, but it's just a little bit even more noticeable when something extremely traumatic happens. Everyone's aware of it.
Sure.
There was the district attorney did not come out and talk to people about the process and who to contact if you have any concerns or questions or information, or what to expect. I mean, obviously you can't get involved in details of the investigation. This is what we're doing. This is what we're looking at. I mean, you can't alert suspects and but you can share general information to help people understand what the process is and reassure them in times of trauma and tragedy, because there were children involved in this, okay? They attended the public school district. People's kids knew them. People knew this family. And it was a horrible, horrible, disgusting crime. You need some leadership there. So that's sort of what I'd have to offer about the controversial cases, I think, from like an overarching global perspective.
Great, thank you. So you've been campaigning, you're busy, you're on school committee. So what keeps you energized? Kind of what keeps you going through this campaign?
Yeah, that's absolutely the easiest question. So I have, there are two places where I have pictures of like my wife and my two kids. One is above my bureau where I'm getting ready for work every day or whatever I'm doing that day. And then one is at my desk at work, like right on like my computer. And I just, that's the number one thing to me. I'm just so lucky and blessed to have kids. I love being a parent. I love being a dad. I love being a husband and in a relationship and building a family with someone. And like that's what really matters. I'm not doing this to fill any void in my life. I'm doing this because I think I have value to offer as a public servant. And I've honed some skills in my experiences. And that's why I'm doing this. But what keeps me going, because things can get, like, look, this is, like, I don't know if everyone has known someone personally that's done something like this, like put themselves out there, or if they've done it themselves. And everyone has stresses. Everyone puts themselves out of their comfort zone every once in a while, no matter what people are doing. You need to have that, like, that what you just said, what gives you motivation. And, for me, it's them, and like that's why I look at those pictures and I'm like, it puts you in a good mood, it puts you in a good space, even if you have something really stressful or anxiety inducing or frustrating that you have to confront that day. That's sort of what gives me the energy, and like when you're campaigning and whether you're knocking on doors or you're waving at people or you're going to a farmer's market and shaking hands, like people just saying, hey, good luck, like, I appreciate, like, I like the message, like, or hey, I saw one of your signs out there, something that helps too, when you're from a campaigning angle. Or when I'm working, like, I just came from court and I just helped someone that has gotten their hands around some substance abuse issues, and seeing that keeps you coming back, because you're that's why I do it, right? And it's just so great, and you see they're getting their kids back in their life, they're getting back to work, all these things these pieces start to fall back into place for folks. So I don't know, I think there's a lot, but like I think the driving thing are just like, I like, just family's the most important thing, like just to keep that, and like, when everything else, like this election, win or lose, you come back to that and you have that good base, and that's really what matters. Everyone's happy and healthy.
That's right.
Yeah,
I ran for school committee a few years ago in Quincy, and I didn't win, but my kids definitely kept me going. Because you're just like, okay, we're here to make this school better, to make the community better, and I can see how, if we do these things, my kid and their friends in this community will really benefit in this really impactful way.
That's it. Yes.
So
do it again. You can run all the time. That's the thing about school committee, right? It's always turning over.
Sure, all the time.
And it's a labor of love. And if you already had an interest in it, you should do it. How old are they?
13 and 8. So we've still got a little ways to go.
I'm in the same range.
Are you?
Yeah. I got a 13-year-old as well. So you should do. It's so awesome. I love it, because every once in a while, like, you get impactful issues, like COVID was really tough, and that's just like using a ridiculous example.
Right.
But you get things that people are engaged about and they might be concerned about, but then you have like the kids will come in and present. And like you have like the second graders come in for a reading presentation or something like that. You're like, this is why we do it. I just went to graduation. And as the school, I got to go to all those, and I don't have to. I love to. We go, right? And it's the culmination. Those kids were in 5th grade when I started in the school committee.
Oh my gosh.
And it's the culmination. All the teachers, elementary, middle school, high school, they've contributed to these amazing, smart kids that we're putting out into the world, which, by the way, their generation is going to save us all.
Oh my God,
because
I
they're
hope
more
so.
service-oriented.
They better.
They are more service-oriented. They are. It's just so inspiring to see that. So do it again. Keep on going. I'm telling you, you will love it. You will love it. If you like this sort of thing, you will love it. You will love it.
Well, I after I didn't win on school committee, I started this nonprofit, Quincy Votes, that is focused on civic engagement. It's obviously my thing. So I'm definitely figuring out ways to stay involved, and maybe it'll be the next, some point. But I definitely can relate to that feeling where you're like doing a million different things, and you have to just stay grounded and focused on what's really important.
Yes.
And I think it's easy to kind of lose sight of that when you're in that kind of go and doing a million different things. But really, it's our family and our community that keeps us going.
100. I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah. So,
excellent.
Yeah.
Well, great way to end.
All right.
Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun.
And we'll see you next time on Liz Speaks.